Welcome to Let's Talk About It, live on LinkedIn, brought to you by the African American Male Wellness Agency. This is a space where we're going to have real conversations about everything wellness, mental, physical, emotional, and beyond. Today's conversation is about hypertension, under pressure, navigating health, stress, and lifestyle. We're going to go take a deep dive with someone whose expertise brings to the table great value for us. So let's talk about it. Today, we're joined by our special guest, my friend, colleague, Dr. Chris Brown, practicing nephrologist and founder of Pressure MD. Dr. Brown, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing pretty good, Dr. Henry. So, yeah, thanks for the invite. I always love to support the cause and to get messages out here about, various health conditions.
All right, we're gonna just jump right into the conversation today because I feel like, um, hypertension and higher blood pressure is a huge issue in our community, but not really talked about as much as it should be. But I do want to get the audience to know a little bit more about you. So, how did you get into this space, field of medicine, but also focusing on this niche of high blood pressure?
Okay. So, I guess a little bit about me. So I am a physician, originally from North Carolina, of course, living now here in Columbus, Ohio, and kind of did my training down in Chapel Hill, and well, did my education at Chapel Hill, my training actually here at OSU, and I had the good fortune of having some really good experiences with my specialty. And my specialty is nephrology, so high blood pressure and kidney disease is what we kind of focus on. And when I was in North Carolina, I actually had a chance to rotate with a nephrologist in the community, and kind of noticed that there were a lot of us that
Mhm.
were on the dialysis machines, and had a really good experience there. When I came here for training at OSU, likewise had some really good experiences, some great mentors, and kind of decided that this was a way for me to have a specialty that kind of affects everybody, but particularly affects us. The hypertension, the kidney disease, we have higher rates of both of those. And so that's kind of how I got into this particular space. Was just kind of a chance of rotating with the right people, really.
Absolutely. So those conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, etc., tend to affect us at a higher rate and usually in a more severe way when it is identified, right?
Right.
And I just feel like our community in general is just under pressure in a lot of different ways, right? And it really doesn't matter to me what walk of life you come from, whether you could be professional in a boardroom or you could be a bus driver. I really feel like stress is a commonality among it, but we've perceived it as normal, right?
Right.
But what is your opinion about, should stress, just because it's common, be perceived as normal? And then how can we identify the normal ways that it does show up?
Yeah. So stress is, I mean, kind of like you said, stress affects everyone,
Yeah.
but it does affect African Americans, especially African American men, a lot more. We can manifest our stress in a different way. We have certain hormones that teach us to that are designed for us to deal with stress. When we were back, before civilization was developed, you needed this stress to get you to run away from predators or whatever,
Right.
things of that nature. So that part of it is normal. The part that's not normal is being under stress all the time. So, if we were, out in the savannah or something of nature, yes, you had to run away from your enemy or whatever. But then, after that, you kind of went back to your regular life. Those hormones would kind of go down and you were good to go. Whereas here, there's stress. A lot of people are experiencing stress, and they're experiencing stress kind of not, kind of all the time, really, if you
Hmm.
think about it. You get up in the morning, you maybe arguing with somebody, someone in your home. You're going outside to, either catch a bus or drive, and they're kind of microaggressions that are kind of all over, kind of hitting you in different places. You go to work, like I said, there's, maybe stress is there. Maybe you felt like you should have had a promotion, but maybe someone's dealing with you, in a bad way. And then, like I said, you go to a store. Like I said, people, go to a store, someone's following you. even though you're just kind of walking around. And different people have different ways they deal with this. So some people may kind of shrug it off, but like for a lot of black men, if you're getting it all the time, like I said, at some point in time, it gets old. It gets old. You get tired of that. And so if you don't have a place to kind of relax, and like I said, those stressors, those stress hormones are kind of hitting you all the time.
Yeah.
So that's where stress, where stress becomes very pathologic and can contribute to some of the things that we're experiencing.
That's good. So the stress hormones, A, kind of what are they? And then B, how, it's affecting us mentally, but also physically. So when it's hitting us, Doc, what changes should we be aware of? Because we may not even perceive that we're under stress because we think it's normal to be following the grocery store when we're just trying to get some milk, or we may just think it's normal and part of life that we receive these, microaggressions, if you will. So what should we be kind of paying attention to with our bodies? Because our bodies are trying to tell us our state of well-being, but we ignore it because we're so busy. Right.
Okay. So sometimes the way that a person will know that they're stressed is going to a place where they're not stressed. If you're growing up in an environment where, yet again, you're constantly under really assault. I mean, for lack of a better word, if you're constantly under assault, you may think that your reactions are normal, because like what happens is that if you're constantly under stress, like I said, there are some hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, so things of those nature, those hormones that are kind of elevated. Well, what are some of those responses? You might become more aggressive. You might become, like I said, you have less patience, and so it manifests in arguments with people that you may be close to. And if this is going on, if you're experiencing it, the person next to you is experiencing it, everybody is experiencing it, you start to think it's normal.
Right.
But it's not until you get a chance to go someplace different.
Yeah.
And let your body kind of relax. So sometimes when people go on vacation and they notice themselves kind of relaxing and things of nature, that they know, wow, this is what was going on.
Right.
So sometimes it's very difficult to know that, and sometimes it's other people that notice it, that you're starting to snap more than you're getting short with your words. You maybe, like I said, you may be a more aggressive, and you're not even it's not even registering with you, but other people can see it in you. So this can happen, especially if you're getting a lot of stresses going on. And like I said, sometimes the only thing is to take yourself out of that situation, and that way you can know that you were under stress.
Yeah.
After that, then you need to know how to address those stressors. Like I said, some people will, because some people, like I said, some people are aggressive. Some people will actually withdraw.
You're right.
And that's how they deal with it. But that too is not good, because you may be withdrawing, but you still have the stressor. You're still angry. You still don't like the outcomes. And so sometimes it's a matter of, maybe, checking in with, getting a counselor, or, sometimes if you're just, and remember, counseling is just talking a lot of times. So sometimes talking to other people that can help you negotiate, these various negative interactions, so maybe you think that, like I said, somebody's following you, your reflex is to turn around and argue with that person. If you talk to someone else, they may give you other ways of negotiating that, where you turn around and say, hey, how you doing? Is there anything I can do for you?
Right.
So you kind of flip it on them. So, which, allows you to address that issue, but to address it in a way that, for a black man, like I said, you're not perceived as being hyper aggressive. They're not calling security now they're embarrassed instead of calling security. So those are different ways you can deal with these sort of situations.
Yes,
so go ahead.
No, that's good, because you kind of framed it in, we have this built-in stress response, this sympathetic nervous system response that has its place for a period of time, right? We can fight, right? We can flee, right?
There you go.
Freeze is another response. And and falling is another response. All these different ways our body responds to chronic stress, but sometimes in our busyness and doing and succeeding and grinding, we miss these responses that we are having for a prolonged period of time, and then
Exactly.
those hormones wear on us mentally and physically. Like
Exactly.
for me, I'm 45 now. I've been diagnosed with high blood pressure since 30.
Okay. Okay.
So, and I don't know how long I had it before then, but I wasn't symptomatic. I didn't think. It was on a routine screening, just a physical.
Mhm.
I was high, came back a week later, I was still high. Then
Mhm.
I was started on a program for that. And I thought I was in decent health, you know. My father, he was diagnosed with high blood pressure similarly in his 30s, and he's like 5'7", 150. He's not, I mean, he's a very much average size, actually that's kind of a slight guy. But there's a genetic component, right? But then there's this other like environmental component. Can you speak to those different components that kind of make up how we come with high blood pressure?
Okay. Okay. Great. So, yeah, you point out some really good pointers there. So one I would like to point out is the fact that kind of like you said, you went to a screening and they found your blood pressure was elevated. You didn't feel nothing. You didn't notice anything different. You just, you put your arm in a cuff,
Right.
and they gave you some numbers and said your blood pressure's high.
Yeah.
So one of the things about high blood pressure is known as a silent killer. Okay. And so people don't understand that you don't feel high blood pressure unless it's emergent. So there's some people, like I'll go to, these community groups of the nature. They're like, oh, no, my blood pressure, my blood pressure is fine. It's just a little elevated. I don't have no headache or nothing. Okay. When you feel the headache from your blood pressure, you're supposed to go to the ER. Okay, this is end organ damage. This is what we call symptomatic hypertension.
Right.
So when you have, like I said, when something goes on and it's the cause of it is your high blood pressure, that is symptomatic high blood pressure. You're at a danger zone at that point in time.
Right.
So kind of going back to that piece, like I said, normal hypertension, your blood pressure can be high, but you cannot have it, but you don't have symptoms, but it's still high, still doing its damage, still doing its thing. So that's one thing to think about. Okay. In terms of, some of the causes of high blood pressure, they really kind of fall into what we call two main categories. One is what we call essential hypertension. I think they call it primary hypertension now. And that is the majority of people that have high blood pressure. And it really, there's a number of different things that contribute. They really can't pinpoint one. It's usually like multiple things going on. Family history is one of those things. And then they have something called secondary hypertension. This is where, there are causes that they can link directly to why you have high blood pressure. And these could be things such as, there could be kidney damage. There could be decreased blood flow to the kidney. There's certain hormones that could be elevated that can be contributing as well. And these are what we call secondary. And those usually, if we find them, we typically can treat them. So
Right.
it's up to your clinician to kind of sort out which one of those it might be. But like I said, the majority of people do have what we call the primary. Now, going back to what you were mentioning before in terms of the genetic, so there is a genetic link
Okay.
to high blood pressure. So if your mom, if your dad got high blood pressure, granddad got high blood pressure, you're probably going to get high blood pressure. And so, at some point in time, like I said, you might be 20 and fine, but you need to keep checking that blood pressure on a regular basis every couple of years, because like I said, you may likely develop high blood pressure as time goes on, because of that genetic component. And then the other things that contribute, of course, high weight. Like I said, people that have a lot of weight on board, what we call obesity. Those people tend to have higher levels of blood pressure, and then of course poor diet. That also contributes as well.
That's good. That's good. And you know what? I was in denial about it myself. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a doctor. I should be a clean bill of health, but I needed to take agency over those numbers, right? And own it and do something about it. And not just say, you know what, it runs in my family, it's going to happen anyway, and do nothing about it. Like there's things that can be done. On something you said was that when you're symptomatic, it signifies in organ issue, right? I had a friend, similarly, black male in his 30s. His first symptom that he perceived was loss of vision, you know, and we sometimes don't think about all the organs that can be tied to our blood pressure. So if you could, I feel like we're kind of backtracking a little bit, but explain a little bit about what blood pressure is,
Okay.
and then the different organ systems that may be involved.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Actually, that's a really good point to define it first.
Yeah.
So your blood pressure. So we have these special devices, blood, I'm gonna just say it called blood pressure cuff.
Yeah.
It has a special name, but blood pressure cuff is it. And so what these devices do is they measure the pressure that is in a part of your body called an artery. Okay. And so what the artery is, it carries blood from the heart all the way to the rest of your body. So think of it kind of like a plumbing, blood plumbing or whatever. So you got to have a certain amount of pressure to make that happen. So what these devices can do is that they can measure the blood pressure, and what the blood pressure consists of is got a top number and a bottom number. The top number is what we call systolic. The bottom number is what we call diastolic. The top number, the systolic one, is when your heart squeezes. It's the pressure that the blood exerts on that artery, on that vessel, as it's kind of flowing out to the body. Okay, that's what we call systolic pressure. And then the diastolic is, or the bottom number, is the pressure that's there whenever that heart relaxes. So it's the lowest pressure within that vessel. And that's what we call the diastolic blood pressure. So we got those two different numbers, and that's kind of how we kind of define blood pressure. It's like it's a pressure inside the vessel, and we got the two different numbers. Okay, so we have those, and then we have certain numbers that you will get with the top number and the bottom number, and we use that to kind of determine whether or not you have high blood pressure. So if that top number is greater than 130, 130, because a lot of people think it's 150, 160. No, it's 130. Then that can get you high blood pressure. If the bottom number is higher than 80, then you have high blood pressure. Now, what happens with a lot of people is everybody focuses on that top number. A lot of people don't really look at the bottom number. And I can say even amongst the clinicians, a lot of clinicians don't, kind of like, oh, but 90, it might be, they kind of dismiss it. So, but really, whenever you're looking at high blood pressure and defining high blood pressure, you look at both of those numbers. And like I said, and if either one of them falls within a certain category or rises above a certain certain amount, then you can get the definition of high blood pressure. Now, one thing to think about high blood pressure, to know about high blood pressure, is that, if you come in, into a doc or even, like I said, some of these pharmacies have one that you can use at the pharmacy, and you put your arm in there, and the blood pressure is 150 over 90, but you only have that one reading. We actually don't define you as high or give you the diagnosis of high blood pressure. We actually have you come back a couple of times, actually 3 times what you're supposed to have, and see if it stays up. Because, like I said, if you came in and like I said, you're running a little late, maybe you and the secretary got into a little issue, like I said, you ain't like what the nurse said, that blood pressure may be elevated. But like I said, maybe the second time you come in and everybody's nice, and like I said, things are going well, and it may be down a little bit, because remember, the stressors, stress hormones kind of contribute. So whenever they get the blood pressure, make sure that like I said, if it's your first time having a high one, that they get another one. Now, of course, if it's 200 over something, they
Yeah.
they're probably gonna treat you.
Yeah.
They're probably not gonna let you. They're probably gonna let you out. But like I said, if it's something like the 150s and things of nature, most of the time they'll bring you back and get you some extra blood pressure readings before giving you the formal diagnosis of hypertension. And then, like I said, we want to make sure that's done. Make sure that you're sitting for a little bit. So when they come in, like I said, if it's a little high, sometimes if I get people to have a blood pressure that's just like a little bit high, what I'll do is we'll go through the appointment, and what I'll do is have the nurse go back in there once you've had a chance to kind of sit down a little bit
Right.
and redo the blood pressure.
Uh-huh.
And because sometimes, when you get that second blood pressure, that blood pressure might be lower than it is when you first come in. So
That's
those
good.
sort of things go in there.
No, that's good. And you mentioned the importance of taking multiple readings, and even not just for diagnosis and treatment. I've had it for all these years. I still check my blood pressure at home.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening, just to see what the variations are, see if if sleep is playing into it or something I ate or did during the day, just to get to know myself. You kind of use the numbers and give you a little bit of feedback about what I'm doing and monitoring my progress outside of just seeing my doctor every 6 to 12 months, right?
Correct.
And so I'm sure you advise people to do something similar. Yeah, Brad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So home-based blood pressure readings are actually pretty important. And they're pretty important for a couple of reasons. Number one, of course, kind of like that scenario I gave you. If you have issues at the doctor's office, your blood pressure may be elevated. There's actually something called white coat hypertension, where some people, like I said, for whatever reason, sometimes they've had, negative interactions with hospitals and clinicians. And so they'll go into the doctor's office and they will get anxious and their blood pressure will go up.
Right.
Now, if they take their blood pressure at home, that blood pressure may be a lot less than what it was in the office. And if we find that out, then like I said, we label that person as having white coat hypertension. So that's a condition. That's actually a real condition. The other thing about doing it at home is that, you're at home more than you're in doctor's offices. So kind of like you said, you're doing it, once, sometimes twice a day, just to kind of get those numbers. So what I like to do for my patients actually is I like to get them to do their blood pressure at home and bring me what they call a blood pressure log. So you did the blood pressure, you write it down, and then you bring it back to your appointment. Because if I see that, like I said, I may see that it's lower than what I'm getting, maybe a little higher than what I'm getting. But like I said, that is a better measure of what your true blood pressure is and what it's doing. Okay, and then like I said, you can make better adjustments for the blood pressure medication given that additional information there. Now, one thing about blood pressure machines at home, you always want to make sure that you bring your machine to your doctor's office so that they can compare their reading with the reading on your machine. Because, like I said, now the FDA actually has a list of what we call validated blood pressure machines, but you always want to bring that machine in, compare the two. So like I said, they'll take a blood pressure with their machine. You'll take a blood pressure. They'll then take your machine and get the blood pressure, because you want to see if there's a variation. If it's just a couple points, okay, pretty close. But if it's 20 points, we got some investigation to do.
Right.
So that's part of really kind of taking control of your high blood pressure. The other thing with that is also, like I said, it allows you to kind of understand what's going on with your body. Because like I said, you may get up, some people get up, they'll take the blood pressure before they take the meds. And then they'll actually see the medication bring the blood pressure down. So you got that aspect that's going on as well. So like I said, it gives you like a little bit more ownership of your healthcare and keeps you involved. So
absolutely. And I think it's important to help doctors, like help the helper help you, right? And
it's actually huge. So
yes.
This is one thing that a lot of people don't understand, because of course they go to the doctor like, oh, the doctor didn't spend any time with me, this, that, and the other. With the way reimbursement is, if a lot of docs, especially a lot of independent docs, in order to, and I hate to say money, but like say, hey, if they don't make it a profit, they're not going to have money. Like you can't keep the lights on. But the way it's reimbursed, like I said, the average primary care physician has to see a patient about every 7 to 10 minutes. Okay, so that means they come in, they got 7 to 10 minutes with you. Well, if you come in with, hey, I got this list of blood pressure reading, guess what? Oh, I can make that person can make a much quicker decision. The more you know, the better that appointment can go. It can be a lot more efficient because you're bringing information in. They can make a decision, uh, right, to give you the advice and then keep it going. Now, if they got to go in there and pull information out and stuff of that nature, then it makes it a little more cumbersome. So the more you know, the more interactive you are with your healthcare, the better, um, the more efficient your health appointments can go. So,
That's
I agree with that. So, like I said,
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
make sure you do that.
That's good. And so we're on LinkedIn, right? There's
Hmm.
professionals here who have matriculated through academia, have different positions, responsibilities, et cetera. That brings stress, right?
Okay.
But they may not know what their numbers are. They may be too busy in their mind to go check to see what their numbers are, right?
Right.
And the thing is, it's going to cost you either a few minutes today to get it checked, or it's going to cost you, if something catastrophic happens, like you said, something emergent that's unidentified, that can cost you your business, your position, right?
Hmm.
Um, when someone comes to see you, let's just say you're at a family cookout, family reunion, when people know you're a doctor, you're a doctor 24/7, doesn't matter where you're at, right? And
Hmm. Okay.
say, Chris, my doc said I got high blood pressure, but I'm not sure what I want to do about it. He talked about some medications, what have you, but what other things could I try, right?
Okay.
How do you kind of navigate that situation,
Okay.
right?
Okay. So the first thing I tell them is, I'm a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. So I put the
I
disclaimer
love
out
that
there
line.
really quick. I put a disclaimer out there
Disclaimer,
first and foremost. Look, I'm a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. But
right?
then of course, I go into, providing the education,
Sure,
uh,
yeah, yeah,
the education about what's going on with them. So, it really kind of boils down to what's going on with that person, because if it's just a resistance to kind of what kind of normal medication, I think that within the Black culture we have this resistance to medications. The doc's just trying to make money, this, that, and the other. So number one, I don't make money off, they don't make money off the prescription. That's number one. But don't want to take them, the blood pressure medication, but want to go take some herbal things. Now there's some herbals that might help a little bit, but for the most part, if you got high blood pressure, these medications are designed to get it down, and you really need to have that conversation with your clinician about what that medication does, how it lowers your blood pressure, any potential side effects that are going on there. Because a
yeah,
lot of times, that's once you get beyond the people that just don't want to take meds at all,
right.
then you got to go into like the people that are having side effects and things of this nature.
Sure, sure.
So I think we got that piece. Now going back to the part about people not, especially professionals not understanding the role of getting this treated, and kind of like you said, not understanding that if you don't get this, 7-minute appointment now, this could cost you your career, it could cost you your life, honestly.
Yeah,
And that's a piece that's also, I think, a little bit is also pretty cultural as well. Like I said, we have I think there's two things to talk about. So there's male culture in general, and then there's
yeah,
black male culture.
yeah.
So male culture in general, as compared to women, it's like women have and let's look at pap smears and annual exams, stuff of nature. For a male, once you've gotten your pediatric vaccinations, maybe you'll get a sports physical. Outside of that, there's really not anything that brings you in. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And you add to that, a little machismo, hey, I'm fine, this, that, and the other, then you don't think to go in. You don't, we're not going to just go into the doctors to get checked out. Why I need to get checked out? I'm fine anyway. You add that in there, and so so you're ignored that. And then you got on top of that people that remember, you got 35-year-old people that are remembering, hey, back in the day when I was 18, I was able to do this, that, and the other. Okay, well, you ain't 18 no more. You ain't 18 no more. You know, you got to let go of some of that stuff and understand that you're aging, and that comes with certain responsibilities. You
Yeah.
know, yes, you got responsibilities at work. Yes, you got responsibilities at home if you got family, stuff of nature. But all that responsibility rests upon you being healthy
Right.
and understanding that if you do not have your health, you cannot provide, you cannot protect. Okay. And I've seen, you know, like I think one of the youngest people I've ever seen with a stroke related to hypertension was in his mid 20s. Okay. He was in his mid 20s.
Yeah.
And because I will never forget this guy. The first time they called me to come to the emergency room to come see it, I thought the guy was, I just knew the ER doc was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
God, he's in his mid 20s. So you go in, you see him, and like I said, you know, he can raise the right arm, can't raise the left. You know, and I mean, so he's sitting there, his wife is over there, and when you first talk to him, he's like, yeah, I don't know where this came from. But as you have a conversation, you know, he's like, well, you know, actually, I think one of my, back in high school, you know, they may have told me that something was a little high, and to go see a doc, but I ain't think nothing of it. I felt fine.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, you know, years later, he's in the emergency room with an active stroke.
Yeah.
Now, you know, maybe he'll recover some of his function, but like I said, you know, if you get a stroke, if you are a manual worker, if you need your hands for this, and now one of them don't work, now you got to change. You got to change your career. So, like understanding that relationship and how, you know, taking care of yourself, you're the bedrock of your family. You know, you got to take care of yourself because if you don't, and something happens, like I said, you could lose. Like I said, you could lose your your position, your career, or like I said, your health. And like I said, and a lot of things for men to understand is that, you know, because I think that for guys, you know, there's always that fantasy, oh, I'll protect my family, you know, I don't mind dying for my family. But you know, what happens if you live? Okay, what happens if you don't die from your stroke and half your body is gone, and now you're in a wheelchair, and the people you're supposed to protect have got to swing you around in a wheelchair, and somebody's got to feed you because you did not want to go get yourself checked out.
Just talk about it. Yeah,
You know, that's it. Yeah, like you did not want to go get. You skipped all the appointments. You know, or even worse, you went to the appointment, got the diagnosis, and then didn't take the medication. Because that happens as well. You know,
Yeah.
I don't, you know, like, yeah, I don't like this medication, or maybe, you know, it has some side effect, and you don't go take it. So you just, I'm gonna put this up, and I'm taking some apple cider vinegar. Your blood pressure is 180 over 100. You know, like, yeah. So understanding that, and kind of, you know, for, like I said, the male culture, and then the black male culture, where and for the black male culture, we really do have some negative interactions with healthcare, and I think part of that is you know, yet again, remembering why you're going, and that's to preserve your role, and kind of like I mentioned before about understanding how to interact. You know, a lot of this, you know, there's a certain order, there's a certain thing that goes on inside of your typical medical practice. Understanding how that works, understanding how if you know the front desk person gives you attitude, you know, not you don't have to just hold that in and get home and then tell everybody else about how I thought their front desk person was racist. No, they gotta, you know, there's the nurse, there's the doc, there's a thing called an office manager. Hey, look, I just want to let you know, like I said, look, I love Dr. Brown, but his office manager, you know, gave me some attitude. You know, that can get corrected. You know, you don't have to, you know, or like, hey, maybe you didn't like the doctor. Well, okay, go get another one. Like I said, go get another one. Don't just stop at this one. Don't become passive aggressive about this. This stuff is way too important.
Right.
And for us, like I said, like I said, African American men are, you know, we are, you know, one of the, you know, we get hypertension earlier, we get hypertension worse, and we get the worst outcomes from it.
Yeah.
We cannot sit around and just let this happen to us. We have to become much more active in what we do.
Absolutely. Well said. Like you said before, it's a silent killer, right? It's a silent killer. And, you know, sometimes you mentioned the analogy about pipes. pipes burst, right? But before they burst, the pressure is building, it may leak, there's building up, and you may not know it until the very end, right? So that's why you have to stay on top of these things. And honestly, there's things that families need from men specifically that aren't really wrapped up in providing and protecting. A lot of times they just need your presence, like your active presence. And if you are dead or in a facility because you're disabled from a stroke, then you're not actively present. And your disability insurance won't be enough. Your life insurance won't be enough.
Exactly.
It's not going to cover what they're missing from you being present, right?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely correct. Like I said, I think that the male, especially when you have a family, the male presence there is there for a reason.
Yeah,
it's there for a reason. I mean, like, I think that there is this tendency to dismiss that. And that's, like I said, I hate to say it, but especially within the Black American culture, we have over the last decades really undermined that role. But if you look at stats, the role of that dad there is quintessential for a healthy family. It is absolutely critical for a healthy family. In terms of all kinds of outcomes in those children. Like I said, they have less behavior problems, they have less ADHD, they have less obesity. Like I said, you got all this stuff that goes on. Like I said, they tend to be a little more productive. So all that stuff goes on when that male is in that household and present. So kind of like you said, I think, and maybe this also goes into why Black men kind of don't value their health, because over the years, like I said, if we're developing a culture that is minimizing the importance of men, like I said, that internalizes itself with you. Like I said, if you're not being honored, like I said, you look at these other cultures, like they honor the man, they protect that male space, they understand it, they like I said, they expect that man to be into that space, and they don't try to replace that. So like I said, if you do that, and that male, because what happens, the children, the sons look at that, the boys look at that, they don't have anything to model. Or like I said, they're looking at it, like I said, if you're dismissing that dad, well, I don't know if I want to be that guy. But not understanding, like I said, that your role is critical. There's a reason why they take you out. Because what do people talking about fighting somebody? Look, that's what the male is for. If I want to fight another group of people, I want to take their males out first.
Right.
That's what I need. I need to take the males out first. And once I take the males out, the rest of it, hey, I can roll over the rest of it.
Right.
So I think that we because we're in America, and because honestly America is, as much as we complain about it, honestly, we're highly blessed. We're successful. I mean, like I said, our poor people, like they talk about the poverty and stuff in nature, but for the most part, our poor people don't starve. There's no one coming from one village to the next to to chop us up. Yes, we have issues, but like I said, our issues, if you look across the globe, and especially if we look historically, I mean, our issues don't compare. We actually have a lot of comfort there, and I think in doing so, I think that maybe yet again, we have to redefine the role in the modern era. Not make it obsolete, but to make it better, to become a better men. And I think part of this becomes also that like I said, taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your family, and understanding your role is important. And whether it's a married couple or single parent. Like I said, and especially for the single parents, because I'm gonna tell you, I'm one of those. And I understand. I understand for those brothers that you ain't married to mom, and you've had to go through family court. Like I said, you can feel like you ain't worth nothing. But I'm telling you right now, because a friend of mine told me this kind of earlier on with mine. She's like, look, whatever you do, don't leave. Whatever you do, don't leave. So, and and taking it to this level, not leaving doesn't mean just not, the picking up on the weekends. Not leaving also means taking care of that health, so
Yeah.
that you don't get the stroke, so you don't get heart failure. I mean, like I said, the areas that the hypertension tends to affect are, the brain, strokes,
Right.
the heart failure,
Right.
and the kidneys with kidney disease and
Mhm.
dialysis. And one of the things that a lot of people forget about is the heart failure.
Yeah.
That we didn't really mention it here, but like heart failure, this is where your heart gets weak and doesn't pump. So this is, of course, we know about heart attacks, get the squeeze in, Fred Sanford thing going on there.
Mhm.
But heart failure is a little more subtle. So you start wearing out your heart. And so it normally beats, 55%. Like I said, it goes down to like 5-10%. And what happens with that type of heart failure is that you're just tired.
Mhm.
You can't do stuff because your heart can't beat the way it's supposed to beat. And yet again, you don't want that to happen. And now you can't walk upstairs or you're
Mhm.
swelling all the time.
Yeah.
And yet, kind of like you said again, now you can't fulfill your role that
Yeah.
you need to fulfill because, because your heart ain't pumping and now you got to look for a new heart or something in nature. So,
Yeah.
so
No,
all those different points.
that's great. No, and I'm so glad that you're joining us for this conversation today because, and you get how everything ties together, even the mental wellness piece, right? We've partnered with you and your fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi,
Mhm.
with our mental wellness initiative, Real Men, Real Talk,
Yes.
creating safe spaces for men to just express those emotions.
Mhm.
Those emotions express themselves in chronic preventable conditions, right?
Right.
But like there's this interplay between how we think and then how we feel.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we don't, I mean, we've talked about how stress may affect our body,
Mhm.
but on the flip side of that, if we can change the way we think, if
Yep.
we can go to a peaceful place, if we can improve our mindset, right,
Right.
that can help kind of calm things down and
Mhm.
allow us to manage things differently, right? So
Right.
when you're suggesting a holistic approach to this blood pressure issue, right?
Mhm.
Where does mindfulness fit in? Where does exercise fit in? Where does nutrition fit in? How do you manage all those?
Okay. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
So when it comes to kind of this holistic view, as physicians, public health people, I think we have a tendency to separate the hypertension, the mental health, the whole 9 yards. But really, all this stuff overlaps. The mental health, the physical health, all that stuff overlaps. And I also I'm certified in lifestyle medicine, and one of the things that goes on there is that they talk about what we eat, how we exercise, sleep and stuff of nature. Our diet contributes significantly to high blood pressure. One of the things we tell people to cut back on is salt.
Yeah.
What we're learning to tell people to cut back on is not only just salt, but also refined carbohydrates. So the sugars and stuff of that nature. We promote a whole food. Now they say plant-based. I say plant-enhanced diet because I still like my meat. But a whole food plant enhanced diet, and what that is when they say whole food is that you want it as minimally processed. You want it as close to nature as possible, and that is because the less processed it is, the less chance that somebody else can put something in your food, and that's basically it, right? So so you want to make sure that you're like I said, if you want a tomato, go get the tomato off the plant. If you want to, even if you want a steak, I mean, like I say, go get the steak. Cut a steak, a good solid cut of steak, a little low fat. Don't eat chicken nuggets. Eat a piece of chicken. So and then like I said, and then also increase your consumption of plants. So the legumes, fruits and vegetables. Make sure you're adding all that stuff in there because that all that stuff is extraordinarily important. Like I said, not only because it's not only about salt reduction, but also in the other elements that are in natural foods, like I said, your potassium, your fiber and stuff of nature. All that stuff goes towards your overall health.
Right.
So that's one from a food standpoint, and then from a the exercise standpoint, we're designed to move. Okay, And one of the things that has happened, as you know, can we talk about the cultural differences, is that as we've become a little more convenient, you know, sitting has become the new smoking.
Mm.
So, you know, we sit at home, we sit, you know, at our jobs, we sit in our cars, we don't walk anywhere. You know, we're supposed to get what, the 10,000 steps a day. We're supposed to get, you know, 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week. That stuff is extremely important in a couple of things. Number one, it, you know, kind of directly, you know, your walk a day actually has mental health benefits. Walking, if you go walk, do a mile walk or something in nature, you ain't even got to do a power walk, just a leisurely walk. It helps you physically and it helps you mentally. You're outside in nature, you're getting some vitamin D, you're taking a look at things. You know, you can actually, for a lot of people, they'll feel themselves calming
Yeah,
down. Like I said,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
just going for a stroll. Like one of my buddies called it old man stroll. Just go out there, just walk around. Like, yo, and that is extremely important. And it's especially important if you are typically sedentary. That movement from sedentary to starting to move is one of your biggest health gains that's there. And then on top of that, like I said, then you want to hit that 10,000 steps a day. Like I said, that stuff is important. So those things are important. The building of muscle mass. I mean, like I said, you build that muscle mass. What does muscle do? It consumes. It helps you to consume and burn off calories. What is that? So what is that? Why is that important? Because obesity is the other thing that drives high blood pressure and a whole lot of other health outcomes. And so, you know, the obesity piece is part of what, you know, you eating more than you burning off. So
Right.
if you switch from processed foods, which are basically hyper palatable and calorie dense foods, to more natural foods that have higher fiber and are more plant based, like I said, you're increasing the nutrition and you're lowering the number of calories that are there, so you don't have to burn off as many. Now, if you couple that with exercise, where you're
Mhm.
walking, what are you doing? You're burning that stuff off, and you're helping your mental health. Okay, what's going on with the mental health? Well, now those hormones we talked about before, if you calm that stuff down, now you're not contributing to your
Right.
hypertension. So
Right.
overall health. Now we have that piece, and then you know you kind of talked about mindfulness and things of nature, and I'm going to branch into something that I think is going to eventually, like I said, I'm part of a lifestyle medicine group, and like I said, we kind of touched base on this, but I think it at some point in time may become more formalized, and that is, you know, our spiritual nature. So we talk about the mindfulness, you know, calm down, meditation, things of nature, but if you look, because I say this because I've, you know, over the last couple of years kind of started reading Bibles and doing some of that stuff. But if you look at that, there, you know, you literally have verses in the Bible that address the stressors that we have on a daily basis. Okay.
Mhm.
It gives you a different framework. You know, you understand that, you know, especially if you're a Christian, like I said, you know, your God became a human and gave you examples of how to live. Like what did Jesus do? He walked all the time. He walked all the time. They fasted. You know, they did fasting. So you know, you have all that stuff going on. And then, like I said, in terms of the mindfulness, like I said, what is mindfulness for a Christian is prayer. You
Yeah.
know, keeping your mind on Jesus. Hey, and take your troubles of the world off and give them. Hey, take you're supposed
Oh,
to take
yeah.
them off.
That's
So
all
you know, there's a blueprint already.
Yeah.
We just have to take it and I think internalize it a little bit more. But that becomes part of that holistic thing, because you know we're not really designed to be as unwell as we are.
Right.
And you know, I think part of this, and because even with the lifestyle medicine, as I'm going through this certification and I'm looking and going to conference and they're describing things, I'm like, y'all sound like my grandparents. You know, like we ate stuff off the, you know, ate off the land, you prepared your own food, you know, you worked all the time, and those things are what they're describing now. And even with the blue zones, I mean, some of those elements are what they assigned, and the blue zones are where those people live to 100 and things of nature. So.
Right. Right.
So that's what's going on there. So I think that, you know, we have everything we need to live healthy. We have to reframe it and have to make it purposeful. And like I said, for Black men, you know, you have to understand your worth. You have to understand who you are and why these things are happening to you. And going back to mental health, also understand that we need our community back. Okay. You
Yeah.
know, we need to, yeah, you need to nod at the next brother that you see. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that stuff matters. Chill for word. Hey, bro, how's it going? You know, like all that stuff. it really does matter, because
That's
kind of
right.
like we said before, if you're getting microaggressions all the time, then like I said, if somebody comes by and they, hey, has a cheerful word or maybe have like a little quick joke, like I said, that can mean a lot to
Mhm.
somebody that is already burdened. So don't underestimate the power of a hey, what's going on, how you doing, or a simple nod or a simple hello in someone else's life. So make sure that you make sure that we remember that as well.
Doc, that is so good. That's so good. So that in those blue zones, in the Bible, it's commonplace to live into your hundreds and beyond, right?
Right.
And the average life expectancy of a black male, especially, is around 72, 70, somewhere around there,
Right.
right?
Right.
About 10 years less than our counterparts, right?
Yes.
And with that said, we have a lot of lost time, a lot of lost opportunity that we have. So I'm glad that we're talking about, the importance of our role, our value, right? When we know our value, even if society says otherwise, if we know our value, then we can start to internalize some of the positive things about ourselves and then
Exactly.
reclaim our position and then do the things that matter to us
Right.
to be present, right?
Exactly.
And the exercise, I mean, the blueprint is already there. The
Hmm.
exercise, the prayer, the fasting, the eating correctly, all that is there. I feel like a lot of people will say, you know what, I know what to do for the most
Hmm.
part. I just either can't get started, don't know where to start, need some accountability, something to help them take that first step. Like you said, a lot of your gains are in that first step that you take,
Hmm.
but that's
Yes.
oftentimes the hardest step to actually
Yes.
take,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So, what would you implore someone to do first if they could, if they're having difficulty navigating um, their their mental health and stress
Hmm.
and their physical health? Being able, how would you help them? At least suggest the first step to actually take.
Okay. So if you can find a buddy,
Yeah.
find someone that either is going through it or someone that's been through it that's willing to work with you. So like if it's like I said, if with the activity, try and either find a walk group, find a virtual walk group, have somebody that'll text you, hey, did you walk today? You can do those sort of things on an individual level. And that can kind of help you out. Like I said, look around and see, who else is doing this. We have Google, so
Yeah.
Google can find your group somewhere that's undergoing the same challenges that you are, and that you can usually join and kind of go from there. But the first step is the first thing we have to do is ask. We have to ask, we have to look out, we have to seek. Even with Christianity, if salvation don't come to you for free, you gotta ask for
Yeah.
it. You gotta ask it. Like, look, yeah, Jesus, like I came down, I died for you. Like, look, but you're gonna ask me, like. So you got to get that in there, and then especially with some of these beginners stages, like I said, whether it's fasting, whether it's exercise. One of the things I tell my patients, especially the ones that are starting with the exercise and starting with the fasting is and if I of course I always find out if they're Christian or whatever, but like I said, if they are, I give them a piece of advice that I saw a friend of mine do, especially for the walking, and that is you combine your walking goal with your spiritual goal. You kind of overline, right? And so she used to do something she called walk with Jesus. And
Mhm.
so, most of these things, most people have access to like a Bible app or something of that nature, where you can listen to the Bible in a year and things of that nature. So what you do is you're setting two goals. One is to walk every day. One is to listen to the Bible every day.
Yeah.
So if the physical doesn't get you, like I said, the spiritual, you should get a spiritual nudge. And so you can use that to kind of help guide that. And that way you're combining the two for you. So like I said, like I said, I'm a Christian, so I talk about Christianity. But if you have, if you're Muslim or something that you,
Right.
you can also do the same thing. And so that's one aspect you could do to help develop. Because for men, what you have to develop is discipline. Okay.
Discipline.
And
Right.
that's something that we don't get taught. We
Mhm.
do not get taught to um, to discipline ourselves. That aspect seems to have been extracted out of modern day.
At least when it comes to our health, but in terms of our wealth, we always
well. I
well
mean, think
on
about
this
it.
platform. on this platform.
Right. So you think about it. I mean, so
Yeah, yeah.
because a lot of it, like you said, a lot of it's overlapping. So yeah, there's some of us that are doing reasonably well,
Yeah.
but remember that the net worth of African Americans is supposed to go to what, 0 and 25. Why is that? Because not only are we not disciplined physically, not
Mhm.
only are we not disciplined spiritually, we're also not disciplined financially. All that stuff overlaps.
Tying it together.
If you look at, like I said, even, where, not that we can't, because like I said, we have, professionals, I know professionals that don't take care of themselves as well. But when you look at the group, like I said, that lack of discipline kind of permeates not just in the health space, but it bleeds itself into the other aspects of life.
That's good.
And so, I think that if you work on the one, like, so I'm gonna work on my physical side, then I'm gonna work on, spiritual, or maybe do them at the same time. I almost can guarantee you that if you pull those off, and like I said, maybe you do that for 6 months to a year, once you get that in order, you're going to look around and you're going to want to get the rest of your life in order.
Yeah.
It's almost like, kind of like the military. Like I said, what's the first thing they do to get you physically together? Physically together, then they get, you got to get that bed and stuff together. You get that discipline in there. And then as you keep doing it, then you can, then like I said, that stuff kind of translates into other aspects of your life. So I think that, yet again, as we go back to Black men, it's like, and a lot of that, and like I said, a lot of that is self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think, you got to think that you're worth something. Because otherwise, you'll sit down, you'll smoke some weed, play some games, and next thing you know, 10 years has gone by.
Right, absolutely.
So, yeah. So,
and you said a lot of powerful things there. I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I heard you say, you have said a lot of gems, but sitting is the new smoking. I think is a tagline that smoking has been outlawed in a lot of places. We might need to outlaw sitting in a lot of places, right? Because it's really changing our role and our purpose, really. But Doc, we're kind of coming up against it as far as time goes. Time flew by.
I know, it really did.
I enjoyed this conversation so much. But for our audience, how can they stay connected to you? How can they follow you? And how can they support you? Anything you have coming up here?
Okay, so I do have 2 websites. So one is www.pressuremd.com. So www.pressuremd.com, and that's for the hypertension practice. And then there's the Doc Brown, www.thetocbrown.com. So you can find me there. Of course, I'm on Facebook as well. I think it's a little difficult to find me there. And those are probably the easiest one. Now, if you do want to reach out to me via email, you could do admin at pressuremd.com. So that you can send emails that way also, and kind of go from there.
Excellent. I do appreciate you. The work that you're doing in the community and even partnering with us, when we have our Black Men's Wellness Day, where we offer free health screening for Black men, you're one of our docs there, helping out, educating the men. And, we find it an amazing kind of number, right? At least 3/4 of the men that we test have high blood pressure on that day, right? Mm-hmm. And then at least half of them, more than half, didn't know that they had it, right?
Yeah.
So this is still an ongoing thing that we're raise awareness about. And though we may have tens of thousands of men come to this event, we still only in the hundreds for our screening. So there's still even a disconnect between getting men to the site and then getting the men from the site to get screened, right? So these different stages and obstacles, these barriers, we have to break down by helping men redefine their role and their worth. I think should implore them to get to know their numbers.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you about that. They have to understand that. I think a lot of times we call ourselves, hey king, hey king, hey king. Well, the king has a royal physician.
Mhm.
The king has a royal physician.
Say that.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
you're when you say SEAL Team Six, that's the toughest guy ever. There's a military. You got to get a screen. Okay, you got to
yeah.
get screened for that. Your athlete on the football field, guess what? He got a medical doctor.
Mhm,
The executive, the CEO, has got executive physical that they go through.
mhm.
You got to get out of that mindset that you can take care of yourself. We all need help.
We all
We
need
all
help.
need help.
Yeah,
And this is a different form of help. It's a self-empowering help. So we
absolutely,
just need to get out there and, like I said, when you come to the walk, make sure you get screened.
absolutely,
We want
absolutely.
100%.
100%.
We want 100%.
Absolutely. Doc, I appreciate you. We are doing Black Men's Wellness Day this year in 20 cities across the country for the African American Male Wellness Agency. Again, I appreciate you and your support of us and just your time today. This great conversation. I hope that it blessed someone. If you want to follow us, we are at aawellness.org. You can follow us on social media at AA Wellness Agency. Until next time, everyone, take care and God bless. Thanks, Doc. Appreciate you.
Thank you.